Hello and welcome to This Is What Came Out of Me, a podcast about anything and everything, but mostly pop culture from movies, TV, podcasts and YouTube. In each episode I talk about things that have grabbed my interest and things that I think that you out there in the ether might be interested in. I'm SierraKiloBravo, let's get into it. This week we're going to talk about The Circle, both the 2013 novel by Dave Eggers and the 2017 movie starring Emma Watson and Tom Hanks. A word of warning before we go much further, these reviews will be full of spoilers for the book and the movie, so if you haven't read or seen them, you might want to come back and have a listen once you have. So, what is The Circle about? Well, here is a synopsis from idreambooks.com. When May Holland is hired to work for The Circle, the world's most powerful internet company, she feels she's been given the opportunity of a lifetime. The Circle, run out of a sprawling California campus, links users' personal emails, social media, banking and purchasing with their universal operating system, resulting in one online identity and a new age of civility and transparency. As May tours the open-plan office spaces, the towering glass dining facilities, the cozy dorms for those who spend nights at work, she is thrilled with the company's modernness and activity. There are parties that last through the night, there are famous musicians playing on the lawn, there are athletic activities and clubs and brunches and even an aquarium of rare fish retrieved from the Marianas Trench by the CEO. May can't believe her luck. Her great fortune to work for the most influential company in the world, even as life beyond the campus grows distant, even as a strange encounter with a colleague leaves her shaken, even as her role at their circle becomes increasingly public. What begins as the captivating story of one woman's ambition and idealism soon becomes a heart-racing novel of suspense, raising questions about memory, history, privacy, democracy, and the limits of human knowledge. Whoa! It sounds so exciting, doesn't it? Except it's not. It starts off great, and Eggers, the author, does a pretty good job of introducing May, the people around her, and the circle itself. I went into the book blind, not knowing anything other than that they had made a movie from it. So from the get-go, I wasn't sure where things would go, so I was pretty keen to read on and see what happened and how it all unfolded. But the more I read, the more my intrigue began to turn into frustration. The deeper I got into the book, the more detached from reality everything within it became. The Circle campus is an example of this, as mentioned in the synopsis that I read just before. Clearly, Dave Eggers was drawing inspiration from the likes of Facebook and Google when writing and describing the worksite, but he goes way beyond believability to a near utopic level of grandeur. There are multiple buildings, and each is not your average office block. No, it seems in this world, a building can't be in the campus unless it has a soaring atrium or a world-class this or an extremely rare this or an art piece donated by this unnamed world-renowned artist. It was just so over the top that my eyes rolled at each new superlative. I couldn't help but wonder where the money came for all of it. They never talk about any sort of revenue model, yet the site must have cost millions and millions, let alone staff costs. The book mentions a staff of around 10,000, and let's say for argument's sake that they're all on an average wage of $50,000. That's like $500 million just on salaries. Never mind all the number one hit bands that they have come and play, or the free healthcare that extends beyond employees to their family, or the on-site accommodation, or the, wait for it, specially built tank to house a shark that the CEO discovered in the Marianas Trench. Yes, you heard that right. What I read in the synopsis, and just then, the CEO has been to the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean. It all just seems so wildly unbelievable that it became a distraction every time those things came up. But all that's minor in comparison with the ridiculously encroaching privacy issues that come from the Circle's goals. Whether it's the hundreds and hundreds of sea change cameras placed everywhere without the knowledge of the people they might be pointed at, or the politicians agreeing to be transparent and have their every minute of every day recorded and streamed live. It's like Eggers had a good concept, the overuse of technology, but jacks it up to 1,000 and pumps it full of crack and steroids. And he does this to the point of losing your engagement. In a review that I read, the magazine Forbes summed it up well. They said it was a view of the future so obvious and creepy that you can't imagine smart people will let it happen. And then tie all that in with some events that in the real world would have serious legal repercussions. I'm talking about the stalking, chasing, and then death of the character Mercer. But in the book, it just got glossed over like it was no big thing. Everyone was just like, oops. And by the time I got to the end of the book, I disconnected from any real connection with the book and any of the characters. May's character is paper thin and so ridiculously easy manipulated that it's almost comical. She comes across as just absolutely bloody dumb by the end of the book. That she seems so utterly unfazed by the ever-increasing pushing into her privacy, and that of the others it just seems ludicrous as the book progresses. She barely even questions it, and her rationalizations make no sense. Another thing that made no sense was May's reaction to the number of frowns or dislikes that she got at one point in the story. Within what seemed to be hours, or even maybe days, she went from wondering if the frowners disliked her to thinking that they wanted her dead. Now, I get that this was done for us as an audience to show how deep in the matrix May had got herself, but the super quick escalation in her mind was utterly unrealistic. Unless, of course, May was some sort of paranoiac. But that is something absolutely not likely, based on her openness to having millions of people watch her daily life in transparency. 3 or 4 times the book talks about May feeling a tear in a black void, which I can only assume is maybe her conscience. I don't really know, because Eggers never takes the time to expand on what this means or even resolve it in any way. It just ended up feeling like a faux attempt at some deep and meaningful prose, like a 13-year-old writing what they think is deep and edgy poetry. And then, after all that, the book just ends. It just feels so premature when it happens, like the author got tired of writing and decided to wrap things up in around about 3 pages. All in all, in case you hadn't picked it up already, I came away pretty frustrated after reading this. So what about the movie? The movie stars Emma Watson as May and Tom Hanks as Eamon Bailey, one of the founders of The Circle, and was released earlier this year in 2017. It follows much the same path as the book version, but there are some key differences. The Circle staff in the movie still sound fake and culty, or cult-like as they do in the book, but the movie really ramps it up. Now, this might have been intentional to try and make them seem to come across as overly earnest, but it just comes across as comically bad acting. Or maybe they were intentionally trying to be funny. I don't honestly know. They just seemed like caricatures in a movie trying to be serious. May's reaction to life at the Circle in the movie was much more like I would expect from someone seeing these advances that are promoted as wonderful steps, but are actually incrementally worse invasions of privacy. She seems much more reluctant in the movie and grows more and more uncomfortable along the way, almost the opposite of the book version of May, who blissfully goes along with everything asked of her. But that's about the only positive I could take away from the movie. The dialogue throughout it was just painful. A prime example of this was a scene where Mercer confronts May about promoting his business to the circle, and it was just cringeworthy. The actor playing Mercer was just robotic, and his line delivery was void of all passion, feeling, or personality. Emma Watson does a good job as May, and as I mentioned before, her reaction to what happens to her is much more believable and realistic. But I think that she was doing the best she could with substandard material. Tom Hanks is completely wasted in this role, and while he does look good with a beard, he's given nothing to work with. He just doesn't come across as the tech boss type, a la Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates. John Boyega was so forgettable and underused that when I was writing my notes for the podcast today, I actually forgot to include him in my first draft, and I think that says a lot. Lastly, on the casting front, Patton Oswalt is woefully miscast as one of the other founders. He just seems so out of place and doesn't fit into the tone of the movie. I can't put my finger on what it was, but it was just like he had wandered onto the set and they were like, hey, stand there and say this. Even though its runtime is 1 hour and 49 minutes, the movie feels like it's in a rush. It moves fast and it suffers as a result. The result is that in that rush, there's no time to build the characters enough so that when things happen to them, there's no emotional impact on you as the viewer. I wonder if this material might be better suited to something like a mini-series format. Also, the movie doesn't follow its own rules. Take the disintegration of Annie as an example. The story goes to great lengths to show the reach of the circle. Yet how come no one noticed Annie's issues? With the staff plugged into all sorts of health checks and monitoring, and with video cameras everywhere, why was she allowed to get so bad? This question goes unanswered in the movie, and it's a bit of a plot hole. And finally, the ending. Oh, the ending. It was just absolutely cheesy. It was so cheesy I could feel my arteries hardening from all the cheese. May's speech at the end was, I guess, supposed to be uplifting and inspiring, but it just came across as bland and lifeless. Mrs. B was working at the kitchen table when I was watching the movie, and when it finished and she heard me go, "Oh man, that sucked," she said that from in the kitchen, all she could hear was the audio and everyone sounded empty and robotic. Like the book, there's no solid resolution. They both end on, "Okay, this is what we need to do, let's do it," kinds of statements. But they just end there, and both of them quite abruptly. So is the movie any good? Honestly, if you want to check out a good deep dive into the effect of technology on us as humans, you're much better off checking out a TV show called Black Mirror rather than The Circle. Well, that's all for this time. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out the notes for links to the various things that I've covered today. As I always say, I love talking about the things that we've covered in the podcast, so feel free to leave a comment and let's keep that conversation going. Until next time, I'm SierraKiloBravo, and this is what came out of me.